Welcome all of you to our second symposium of the English department in our faculty, the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Ras Qasim University. I say the second symposium since our first one was last year under the title of Schema Theory and Language Acquisition. I hope that in the near future there will be many other symposia, God willing. First, I'd like to thank His Excellency, Dean of the Faculty, Professor Khalifa Al-Masoud, who is always the patron and supporter of such academic meetings, and who is always so helpful and so ready to offer whatever is wanted in order to go on with such activities. I'd like to thank His Excellency, my head of the department, Professor Khalid Al-Awad, who has insisted on and persisted in attending this meeting in spite of all the responsibilities and in spite of all the affairs that he has to conduct everywhere at many times with so many people. So thank you, Dr. Khalid, so much for attending this symposium. I'd like to offer my greatest thanks also to my dear colleague, His Excellency Dr. Ashraf Abdel-Gawad, ex-head of the Department of Computer, for honoring me with coming to this symposium in spite of all the things that he has to do. Thank you, Dr. Ashraf, so much. And I'd like to tell you that your attendance here for me is everything. Thank you. I'd like to thank Mr. Yusuf Dakhil for the great efforts that he has exerted all through conducting this symposium from A to Z. I'd like to thank my dear students in the Department of English and Translation who are so keen on attending such meetings. Thank you all. Now let's start. Our symposium today is about the translation in relation to acculturation. So the title of the symposium is Translation and Acculturation. First of all, I'd like to start with a brief definition for the first half of the title. Since the first half may be so familiar to the majority of you, translation, but I have some doubts as for the second half, that is acculturation. Let's start with the first half, that is translation. For myself, I usually define translation as a process of conveying meaning from one language into another. It is a process of transferring meaning from one language into another. When I say meaning, I want to include ideas and thoughts. Ideas refer to in what is going on in the mind. That is to say, we can say the difference between the idea and the thought is that whenever you think of something inside your mind and you express it in order to make it public, in order to make it shared, in this case, the idea gets manifested or gets expressed manifestly. So we can say tacitly that thought is an internal construct while the idea is an external one. That is a brief distinction between the two concepts. So let's return again to the definition of translation. Translation is a process of exchanging or transferring or conveying meaning from one language that we call source language into another that we call target language. So we have to operate on two languages at least. I say at least because in some cases we have to operate on more than two languages. We have a source language, that is the language from which we translate, and a target language, that is the language into which we translate. And so we can say that we are operating on two texts, a source text and a target text. If we are translating from English into Arabic, in this case the source text is English and the target language is Arabic, and vice versa if we are translating from Arabic into English. Let's now linger for a while to deal with the goal of translation. The main goal of translation, the main mission of translation as a process is to understand and get understood. That is to say, to be able to understand others and to make those others understand you. In other words, translation helps to create mutual understanding, mutual harmony, mutual agreement, mutual conciliation amongst the speakers of different languages. Translation helps to establish a relationship between the source and the target language or text so that they can communicate the same message. So the criterion for translation to be successfully accomplished is to exchange messages. If we manage to convey the message, if we manage to convey the meaning from one language into another, in this case, translation has been successfully rendered. Translation helps to bridge the gap between language users. In this case, I'd like to point to what I call language barrier. Since groups of different languages have to communicate with each other, but in this case, the language may be a barrier hindering such a communication to be successfully undertaken. In order for communication to be successfully rendered, in order for understanding to be mutually undertaken, language barriers have to be knocked down. In order for language barriers to be knocked down, there should be a means to facilitate understanding, to facilitate communication amongst various language users, amongst users who speak different languages, and that can be rendered via translation. Okay. Now let's deal for a brief minute about the history of translation. Translation as a human activity. I myself tend to consider translation as one of the oldest human activities. It came into existence as a result of the need of different users of different languages to communicate effectively. Of course, God has created so many tongues, so many languages. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. In order for those shu'ub, in order for those qaba'il to be able to deal with each other, to be able to communicate with each other, there has to be a type of translation in order for one tongue to understand another, in order for one user of a certain language to be able to understand others, in order for speakers of a certain region or a certain country that uses a certain language to understand a certain language in another region used by certain other people. I consider official documents and religious texts, official documents and religious texts to be the oldest types of translation. What is the connection between official documents? What is the link between religious documents and translation? Official documents, that is to say, documents of rulers, of caliphs, of emirs and kings that were sent to other countries, other kingdoms, other areas that they used to conquer or used to rule, in order for those rulers, for those caliphs, for those kings to be able to deal with the people of other countries that they used to invade, that they used to conquer. They had to use the language of those people, and this is translation. As for religious texts, in order for religion to spread over many countries, in many places, holy texts such as the Holy Quran, such as the Holy Hadith, such as the Bible, such as the many other divine books, had to be translated into many other languages. Now Quran is available, and I myself have many versions of the Holy Quran in English, and sometimes I venture into translating such divine masterpiece, although with some fear and wonder at the same time. So these are the two sources of translation: official documents, especially political ones, and religious texts, especially religious scripts and texts from the holy books. Now I'm going to deal with a brand new topic, that is automated translation. Although it is a brand new topic, I'm going to fly over it for only a few seconds. Why? Because I intend in the near future, God willing, I will assign a whole lecture to this topic. Although, as I said, automated translation or computer-assisted translation or machine translation or whatever the term, it is a brand new area, avant-garde area that is still developing, and you may have come across many sites. I myself have some online programs such as Google Translate that may help me while translating, but I myself, as professional in translation, is addicted to translation, would like to express my own opinion. In spite of the fact that the computer can translate, in spite of the fact that the machine can translate, in spite of all that is to be said about machine translation, I myself consider that translation is at last a human activity. That is to say, I consider the spirit of the text, the flavor of the text, the spices of the text to be a human touch. Okay, as I said, I won't say so much about this topic, so now I'm going to deal with the process of translation. I like to deal with translation as a process that encompasses two mutual processes of decoding and re-encoding. We decode the message from the source text, okay, and after that we try to re-encode that message into the target text. We decode from the source language and re-encode into the target language. We can also analyze the process of translation into two subsequent processes of analysis and synthesis. First, we start with analyzing the text into its units, into its components, into its component parts, as for its grammar, as for its syntax, as for its semantics, as for its idioms, as for its culturemes. That is a new term that I'd like to use, cultureme, that is to say cultural aspects or units of the text. So it is a diagnostic vision, a diagnostic operation of dissecting the text into its component parts. After that, we start the process of synthesis. That is to say, we try to synthesize the text to produce an equivalent text into the target language. So we start with analyzing the text and end with synthesizing it into another equivalent text. We start analyzing the source text and end with synthesizing a target text. I think now that the process of translation is quite clear. Now for the second part of the title, this is the main part of the symposium, which is acculturation. Acculturation, as I told you from the very beginning, is a new term, and I'd like to use it in the sense of exchanging culturemes, exchanging cultures, exchanging cultural aspects, taking and borrowing culturemes from one culture into another. I'd like to start from a hypothesis that I adhere to so much. Acculturation depends on respecting the other and accepting that other regardless of his language, religion, ethnicity, etc. That is to say, to achieve a mutual acceptance and respect of the other. If we respect the other, if we accept the other, that other will automatically respect us and accept us regardless of our language, our religion, our ethnicity, and so on. Translation is an attempt to explore the unknown, starting with oneself and ending with the other. We start our exploration with ourselves. We try to discover what is hidden. We try to promulgate the secrets. We try to dig out what is hidden in ourselves in order to be shared with others. If we discover ourselves in a process that I'd like to liken to Ulysses' adventure, okay? If we find ourselves in our search, in our Ulysses adventure of ourselves, we can succeed in discovering the other. In this case, if we discover our identity, if we discover the identity of the other, we can reach an infinite identity, that is a collective identity, via invading individualistic identities, through joining the others, through joining the self, in order to produce one identity. In this case, the self and the others produce one identity, and we can manage in this process to bring in what is hidden in the other to be shared. Everything in this way becomes common, becomes shared. We can reach, in some cases, a merge between the self and the others in a collective or an infinite identity. In this way, I'd like to linger for a while to deal with two terms that I borrow from psychology, but I'd like to use in this respect. The first is cultural narcissism, and the second is solipsism. Both I borrow from psychology, and both are so similar to each other. I want to say that acculturation helps us to get rid of cultural narcissism and solipsism. In this way, cultural narcissism and solipsism are about to be obsolete terms. Okay, cultural narcissism means person's self-admiration. The self admires itself to such an extent that it considers that there is none else but it. That is to say, the self reaches a point of self-admiration that enables it to eliminate all others around it. The person who is narcissistic can be considered a great self-admirer. He considers himself the only one, the only topper. Of course, we have heard many names in so many specialized fields who have reached the tops, who have become so prominent figures. Especially, I am going to speak about literature since it is our area. None in the world hasn't heard about Naguib Mahfouz. None hasn't heard about Taha Hussein, about Tawfiq al-Hakim, about Abbas al-Aqad, and so on. Those people were very culturally aspiring people, to the extent that they reached their tops and were considered to be toppers. I would like to illustrate my point with Abbas al-Aqad, because I consider this person to be a very culturally narcissist. That is to say, he was suffering from cultural narcissism to the extent that he considered himself to be the only topper and none could reach him. I do remember now an occasion that can illustrate this point quite legibly. Of course, we know that Al-Aqad was a prolific writer. He wrote so many books, articles, essays, studies, and so on. Although he had a moderate education, he never had a university education. However, he made himself by himself. He was a self-made man, as he used to confess. This man soared so high and reached the zenith, reached the climax of culture via his own self-endeavors. One day, one of his colleagues suggested that he should offer one of his books, such as any one of the Abqariyat, to any university all over Egypt in order to grant him the doctorate. What was Al-Aqad's response, do you think? He said, who will give Al-Aqad a doctorate? A very culturally narcissistic response. He considered himself to be beyond the doctorate degree. He considered himself to be above the doctorate degree. Let's return to our topic again. I say that cultural narcissism and solipsism are about to be obsolete terms in the midst of the merge that is being brought about through acculturation. Toppers are no longer living in the ivory towers. Poets, dramatists, novelists, short story writers, and so on no longer live in the ivory towers looking with their eyeglasses over the people from a long distance. No, they have to come down to live with the people, to share the people, and to think like the people, and to share the people their thoughts and ideas. Now I think it is quite clear. Now I'm going to survey so quickly the history of acculturation, starting with the pre-Islamic era. When I speak about the pre-Islamic era, I mean the period prior to the appearance of the Islam, in which man was confined to the tribe as the terminal of his relations. Now we are living in Qasim, in what was called formerly Najd, And this is the area about which I'm going to speak. Man used to linger after grass and water. The only motive that moved him was grass and water. He used to rotate in a vicious circle, searching for grass and water within the provinces, within the terminals of his tribe. He fancied himself to be the center of the universe. The tribe for him was everything and nothing else. However, bit by bit, with the help of trade, summer and winter trade, رحلتي الشتاء والصيف, he became to get in contact with others. And this was his first attempt to know that there are others. This was the first attempt to disclose the vicious circle. This was the first attempt to deal with others. Some began to deal with foreign countries such as Persia. I'm speaking now about Persia in order to find a difference in language, because whenever they traded with Sham, whenever they traded with Yemen, they spoke the same language. But when they ventured to deal with Persia, they had to use Persian, and this was the first step towards translation. Some Persian terms began to appear in the Arabic poetry. If we read Al-A'sha's poetry, we can find some traces of Persian, and also in the poetry of Abu Nawas, in the poetry of Bashar ibn Burdi, we can find many traces of Persian poetry, of Persian words, of Persian terminology. So the pre-Islamic period ended with man's attempt to get in contact with others via using others' languages in order to be able to deal with those others. If we shift to the Abbasid era, and I myself consider the Abbasid era to be the golden age of translation. This is the period of prolificity, whether in philosophical translation, literary translation, folkloric translation, administrative translation, scientific, arithmetic, and so on. It is really the golden age, since in this age we have so prominent advances in the field of translation. Only I like to cite examples. We have heard so much about the Caliph Harun al-Rashid and his son al-Ma'mun. I consider them to be the patrons of translation in this era. They used to support translators to such an extent that we find so prominent figures in translation in this era. We have Hunayn ibn Ishaq, and I consider him to be the first professional translator. Hunayn ibn Ishaq translated more than 100 books. He mastered many languages. He was proficient in Arabic, in Syriac, in Greek, in Persian, and many other languages. Hunayn used to get his fees in gold. That is to say, he used to weigh his books in order to be able to know their weight. He used to translate the book and to weigh it. If it weighed 1 kilogram, he used to get 1 kilogram in gold, and so on. Harun and al-Ma'mun took such a role to play in translation to the extent that Dar al-Hikmah was founded in Baghdad during this period. After Hunayn ibn Ishaq spent his years in exerting his efforts, we find that his son Ishaq bin Hunayn loomed large in the period, and the son excelled his father, in translation also. So as I told you from the very beginning, this is the golden age of translation. If I am speaking about Hunayn as being multilingual, I said that he mastered Arabic, Syriac, Greek, Persian. We can find in the literature many other translators who were so prominent, who were so proficient in so many languages. Not only Hunayn ibn Ishaq. I can remember Musa ibn Sayyar al-Aswari. This was a religious man. This was a man of religion. This was a man of religion. He used to give the religious sermon. He used to give the religious speech using two languages at the same time. How? He used to sit in the mosque in order to explain the Holy Quran. The audience used to consist of people of two different languages, of Arabic and Persian. Musa ibn Sayyar used to make the Arabs on the right and the Persians on the left. He used to say one verse, one ayah of the Holy Quran, to look on the right and to explain it in Arabic, to look on the left and to explain it in Persian. The interesting thing is that none of the audience could detect whether he was an Arab or Persian. In the modern age, we have so many names of prominent figures who were also multilingual. We have Sulaiman al-Bustani, a Lebanese one. He mastered 13 languages. He translated the Iliad. The Iliad is written in 17,000 lines. He translated the Iliad into 11,000 lines, spending 17 years. He used to speak in the parliament using as many languages as the number of people of different languages present. He used to address the Arabs using Arabic. He used to address the English using English, the French using French, and so on. We have also Dr. Edward Said, who mastered both English and Arabic at the same time. Dr. Magdi Wahba, who used English, French, and Arabic. I have a dictionary for him written in 3 languages. We have Mai Ziyada, who mastered 4 languages: English, French, German, in addition to Arabic. And we have Dr. Ahdaf Swaif, who mastered English and Arabic to the extent that she authored her novels in English and her mother translated them into Arabic, such as The Map of Love that Dr. Fatma Musa translated into Arabic. Now let's look for a while at the role of acculturation in literature. I am speaking specifically about literature for the fact that it is our area. Translation has helped to develop literary genres, especially poetry, especially short stories, especially dramas, by feeding them with new styles and injecting them with new blood. That is to say, translation helped to provide literature with new experiences from other literatures, from other countries, from other authors, from other writers. Without translating the Greek philosophy into Arabic, I think Al-Ma'arri's philosophical experience, Al-Mutanabbi's speculative experience, Abu Tammam's exotic experience, all such experiences wouldn't get mature. Why? Because through translating the Greek philosophy, Al-Ma'arri, Al-Mutanabbi, and Abu Tammam managed to get new blood, to get new styles in order to feed their poetry. Without translating our holy prophets' night journey to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and his ascent to heaven into English, and without translating Al-Ma'arri's the Epistle of Forgiveness into English, that was translated by Amin al-Rihani, Dante wouldn't have mastered such a masterpiece of the Divine Comedy. Without translating Ibn Tufail's Hayy ibn Yaqzan into English, we wouldn't have come to enjoy Robinson Crusoe in English. Without Dr. Fatma Musa's translation of Naguib Mahfouz's works into English, he wouldn't have been able to be a Nobel laureate. She paved the way for Mahfouz to be a Nobel winner. Without our great master, our prolific translator, Professor Anani's translation of Shakespeare's, we wouldn't have come to enjoy reading Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, and so on in Arabic. Without Dr. Al-Awad's translation of The Telltale Heart, we wouldn't have been able to read Al-Qalb Al-Fadih in Arabic, that was issued in 1992 by Jeddah Literary Club. Now, I'd like to shift for a while to deal with translation and the cosmic age. That is to say, the role played by translation in the cybernetic age, in the cosmic age, in the computer dominated age. The role of translation looms large in this age, which is characterized by the rapid increase in the linguistic monopoly all over the world. That is to say, there is a rampant increase in the sovereignty of English all over the world. There is a rampant use of a very complicated technical language, whether the language of cybernetics or the language of the internet or jargons of special areas. The emergence of the concept of the global village and the absence of boundaries all over the globe has made it necessary for translators to exert efforts in order to facilitate communication amongst various parts of this global village. Now I'd like to deal for only 1 minute with a sad piece of news, although it is, as I say, a sad piece of news, but academic honesty impels me to say it. It is about the tragedy of translation in the Arab world. Yes, I really consider it to be a translation. According to one of the statistical studies that I have got to read, it has been estimated that what has been translated in the Arab world since Dar al-Hikmah was founded in Baghdad equals what is translated in Spain in 1 year. And as I said, this is a tragedy, and we as experts in translation should attempt so hard to find remedy in order to overcome it. In order to overcome this tragedy, I'd like to cast this good news about translation. The news is cited by Pushkin, the Russian poet, who said that translators are the horses of enlightenment. And I myself would like to end this symposium with my metaphor that translation is an X-ray, not a Xerox. What is the meaning of translation as an X-ray, not a Xerox? This will be the topic of the next symposium, God willing. Last, I'd like to thank you all and goodbye.